Hello, everyone. I'm Jessica from the Paris Blockchain Week Summit. It's my great pleasure to introduce today this great webinar brought to you by the Blockchain Chamber of Commerce, the standards-focused BCC Member Spotlight Supply Chain Vertical webinar. Thank you so much to the Blockchain Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this webinar, and also to DFM Data for participating, and all of the speakers for participating. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rayshawn Chambers, the CEO and President of the Blockchain Chamber of Commerce, and Linda Gates, the Executive Vice President at DFM Data. Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Standards Focused BCC Member Spotlight, our supply chain vertical. Along with our dedicated members, leadership team, and all of you, I would like to extend a very special welcome to the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, all of our followers on social media, and each of you. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here today. I am Rayshawn Chambers, the President and CEO of the Blockchain Chamber of Commerce. I've spent over a decade in emerging technology and fintech with a good amount of focus in blockchain. Today, we will have an informative two-part segment webinar for you. Our first segment is going to be an introduction to dynamic digital freight matching, where our moderator is going to be Andy Sarowitz, who serves as the Vice President of DFM Data Corp, of marketing at DFM Data Corp. Our second segment is going to be focused on needs for standards. Our moderator is going to be Linda Getz, co-founder and CEO, and Vice President of DFM Data Corp. By chance, should you happen to miss any of this information, everybody, you will be able to play this back on demand when the recording is available. Linda, would you like to welcome everyone?
Absolutely. And thank you, Rayshawn. It is such a pleasure to be able to participate in this event with you, and not only representing the Blockchain Chamber of Commerce as a past leader of that organization, but representing DFM Data Corp, who is a member currently of the Blockchain Chamber of Commerce, as well as CSCMP, and very happy to be able to bring to the table today some phenomenal leaders in the industry. I call them OGs. They are the old guard. They have been in the trenches. They know this industry from the inside out. And it's such a pleasure to be able to help educate the community through the voices of these leaders. So thank you for that opportunity. And I'm very much looking forward to the first panel, where I get to kind of sit back and listen to the voices of the industry, moderated by Andy Sarowitz. And Andy has experience in the financial industry side of things and comes to the table with a vast knowledge of business. And Andy, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Perfect. Thank you, Linda. Just like Linda and everybody else, we're very happy to be here. So the name of this particular segment is called Introduction to Dynamic Digital Freight Matching. I think what's really crucial to understand about digital freight matching is to step back for a second and look at markets. You have to really understand markets to understand the value added and the importance of digital freight matching. I want to keep it kind of simplistic, and all of you probably have heard this before. I don't mean it to be overly simplistic, but every market has buyers and sellers. In the freight market, we have the shippers who are the buyers, and then you have the carriers who are the sellers. The difference between our market, the freight market, the domestic freight trucking market, is so different from other markets in that it's highly fragmented and not centralized. What do I mean by that? I mean that you have brokers all over the country who have a view of their customers, who are the freight carriers as well as the shippers. And they have that small little silo, and that's all they can see. Now, some brokers are larger than others. The problem gets to be that if you're dealing with one broker, you're not going to have a full view of the entire market. You'll just have their view. So what has happened is that the shippers cannot really act on their own because there are so many freight carriers, there are also a lot of brokers. But again, it's siloed, which causes a certain amount of inefficiency, causes a lack of transparency for the overall market. And you really cannot see what a lane costs accurately because no aggregation of data in an anonymous sense. So I think that's the state of the market today. So what is digital freight matching? It's the ability for computer systems to find a buyer and a seller dynamically based on requirements. It could be on KPIs, it could be on who's closest to the facility for a pickup. It could be based on reputation. There are any number of permutations and combinations associated with the technology of digital freight matching that can be utilized, but it also brings a certain amount of efficiency because if everything is centralized and anonymized, you can make better decisions and you'll have better market data. So what I'd like to do is introduce our panelists. The first panelist I'd like to introduce is Neil Huffman. Where are you, Neil?
Hey,
oh, there you are. Neil is quite the expert in freight, digital freight matching. He's worked in the TMS industry for a very long time. He also has a lot of experience with the factoring side of the freight industry. So he brings a lot of experience, and we're going to have a good time asking him a whole bunch of questions. My other panelist is Mark Montague. Mark is a expert in mathematics. He has a master's degree in data, as well as he has been very involved with the industry in terms of freight matching from a technology perspective. So I'm really glad the two of you were able to join. And I want to start off with you, Mark. How do you see the market? What's special about digital freight matching in the sense that it would benefit the industry? And where do you see the industry going, at least for starters? Let's start there.
Well, yeah, I very much come from the old school background, having more than 30 years in transportation, 38 years to be precise. And, you know, the picking up the phone is still the primary means of a free roaming truck finding a shipper. When it comes to digital freight matching, we've got the opportunity to really get rid of some of the inefficiencies. And a lot of the inefficiencies come from the lack of precise knowledge that's out there. We could go pretty deep into that, but some of the things that are out there are duplicate postings, then the wasted time that results from the fact that a carrier has to sift through a lot of potentialities before they actually get matched up with a load.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, Neil, what I want to ask you, based on Mark's comments in terms of data being corrupted, let's take a use case. We'll call it a thought experiment, if you will. We have a load that a shipper posts to a TMS system. He goes to a couple of brokers, they post it. What does that do to the market? Is it viewed as one order, or is it viewed as N number of orders? And then the folks on the other side of the equation, the actual freight carriers, when they see that, do they think there's a demand surge? Does that inflate the price of the market? And how to date has freight matching helped or exacerbated that problem?
So Andy, that's a great way to frame the situation that we're in the industry right now. So as you talked about the use case, what happens in that situation is that one load that you talked about that a shipper needs to get covered is now propagated across multiple platforms, and hundreds of carriers see it and hundreds of carriers chase it. Now, just to step back a little bit, and first off, thank you, Jessica and Rayshawn, for the setting up the seminar, and Linda for the introduction and all that. And I am the old guard as well. So Mark, thank you for admitting to that. I'll be a partner in old guard. But what's happened in the industry is that we've advanced, right? The internet sensation 20 years ago has really created a platform of good opportunities. But what we've done in a very siloed manner is we've created a lot of what we call transportation management software applications. You'll hear me refer to it as a TMS. And a lot of brokers are starting to use them, and shippers as well. So what the TMSs have done is they've put tentacles out to send that one load to multiple places dynamically and in real time, right? So what that does is it puts that one load out there n number of times. And for hours over the course of the day, carriers will be calling on that load to the broker or to the shipper and going, hey, I'll take load 1, 2, 3, 4. And what they hear is, oh, that load's already covered. And so there's a lot of inefficiencies in the space because of that. Now, the good thing is everyone's moving into the dynamic, arena of real-time type insight, but it's in silos, and it's really creating a lot of fuzziness and obfuscation as to whether that load is really available or the trucks are available to carry it. So Mark, that's a great way to kind of tee this conversation up. And it's a real issue in the industry. And I guarantee you, everyone out there that works in this space will admit it.
Sure, that's interesting. Really sounds like while technology can be a help, it sounds like technology is creating a new problem. What we'll call, artificial demand or, phantom demand, if you will, and then data remaining in the system that can't be taken off. Michael Darden probably has a couple of points on this. You've been around in the digital freight matching industry for the beginning of it. How do you see historically how this has worked itself out and to the current state? What can be done? Where do you see things going?
Well, it's great to be able to see the technology really kind of come to the need of the customers demanding information of real-time visibility and status updates of where their shipments are in transit over time in history was a black hole. That there wasn't tools to be able to collect the current statuses or connect which asset was assigned to which load, which was being pulled by which driver who has which mobile device. And the technology, was an inhibitor for the ability for the market to be able to come together in a truly interoperable way. But over the past 5 years or so, there's been a real surge of investor dollars into this space to secure customer acquisition and introduce the digitization of transaction processing, with removing some of the uncertainty of actually identifying not just this trucking company said they were going to take this load, but I've actually got a driver with a tractor, with a trailer that's all in service and up to speed with their licensing, and that quantified capacity is available to be able to move those shipments. That's digital data that wasn't available 20 years ago. The use of information for predictive next steps, next moves was just a real foreign concept. And I think Mark's experience with DAT really speaks to the process of how load boards became the place for dial a truck to turn into digitize your shipment for replication. And digitizing the shipment for replication makes the phone ring, but it still leaves a lot of human beings chasing data that was produced by a computer program.
Interesting. It sounds like the way everyone has just described the state of digital freight matching, it appears to me that that's just one half of the problem. You can post it, but if it remains there, that's problematic because it would waste a lot of people's time. It would deploy assets incorrectly. It would cause multiple phone calls. Michael, in terms of this product, the anonymizer, where do you think this could be of help to the industry in terms of centralization of data, accuracy, transparency?
So I think the anonymizer is designed to fill a void that is a really complex problem. With 200 plus systems being built in different technology stacks with different developers and without a set of standards, they have built systems that are processing a lot of transactions and changing those systems to be able to make interfaces or comply with customer demands is an exercise of being able to really manage your own data and the translation of your data to partners and Tools are better. APIs are better. EDI still exists, and the ability to be able to move files in rapid form exists. But the thing that has changed is the introduction of the tokenized economy, of the availability of digital assets being represented as digital assets, being connected with other digital assets that are part of a transaction between two parties. And that connection, that ability, that trust of the consumers learning from e-commerce, learning from their success of seeing the updates of the delivery shipment on way, or their Uber drivers, updated status on their way to picking them up, has let everybody realize that the technology exists to be able to have that desire for real-time information and to be demanding of it from the providers that are literally wanting to be able to move freight.
Okay. So there are a couple of things you brought up that I think are interesting. I'm hearing a need for governance, I'm hearing a need for standards, but below that, in terms of the standards, to develop these standards, how, if these loads are being posted all over the market in silos, how do we know it's the same load? How could that be done with governance and standards?
So there's some interesting things to it, and Mark can speak to it on a lot of the interfacing work that he's done with previously. Mark, you want to chime in first?
Yeah, we did with rates at DAT was we needed a unique identifier, so we didn't count the same load twice. With all the information that's floating out there, it's fragmented. It comes from various sources. You need to know that if you count one load once, you count one truck once. Without that, if you're trying to measure the market, trying to find out, well, what's the real demand in the marketplace, you can't really do it with high accuracy. You can do it somewhat because you can estimate how much double counting or triple counting there is, but you don't really come up with the true number. If you can boil it down to a unique identifier, then you've really solved the huge problem that's out there in the industry.
So let's talk about what's out there today for a unique identifier for a second. I mean, if I'm a shipper and I have a truckload of water to be able to move from my facility to someplace else, some customer ordered that truckload. They had a sales order number that they had their own sales order number, which is going to come into a purchase order number in my system that I have to store. And I'm going to produce a sales order number that I then have to distribute out to the carrier to be able to deliver it to the one who actually ordered the goods. So there is some identities that are produced at the point of creation of the order. Are you saying that there was an additional global identity that you have used previously to assign to that transaction?
I know as a broker, we had to have a unique number so that we could get our billing correct. And I imagine, the same thing could be done for loads, so that say there's 10 postings on a board, or 10 postings are found in various boards. It could mean that it's one load posted 10 times, or it could be that shipper actually had 10 loads. The other thing is geography points. A lot of times shippers or brokers try to disguise the actual shipping point for competitive reasons. But with today's visibility into what's going on, I mean, there's so much information that's out there. I don't think that's as valid as it was 5 or 10 years ago, certainly.
Neil, how does all these numbers tie into the freight payment side?
Yeah, so so I was just thinking about that, right? So I spent a lot of years in a factoring arena, and part of the auditing process that goes on, for those invoices, every invoice that comes in gets looked at, gets reviewed, and really the thing that we're looking for, we called it a magic number. It was that unique, load number on that invoice for that shipper, for that manufacturer. And that's what got tracked through from end to end in terms of the life cycle of that invoice, right? Who do we bill for it? When we pay our carrier for it, I mean, making sure that we're getting it tracked correctly. So it goes in line with what you're talking about in terms of being able to create that unique identifier on that load, and it follows that cradle to grave process for that.
So yeah, that's a great answer, Neil. Thanks. Go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
I'm hearing that it's siloed. You know, these identifiers are siloed for particular companies. How could that be done for the industry? How could we work that out?
Let me start that, Michael, and then Mark, y'all weigh in. So earlier on, you know, what's happened, and the good thing in this industry is we're getting younger people into it. So I work with carriers every day. They're running their business off of their smartphone. So that alone gives the ability to track that truck. And listen, there's a lot of solutions on the market. They're tracking them via ELDs, they're tracking them via smartphones and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you have the ability to track that driver. So I think part of the dialogue that we'll get to in a minute is using that driver and that vehicle and that load to create that unique identifier, right? Because you're back to the silo piece. There's thousands of silos out there that are trying to herd the cats of transportation, and it's a challenge. But getting the industry to agree on that common global identifier would be, an opportunity to really make change in this space.
So, Michael, is that something the industry needs? Mark, question for both of you, actually.
Well, if you want to drive out the inefficiencies, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
yeah, if your desire is to be able to solve the problem, yes, then you need it. If your desire is to be able to make it so that people can't and don't know what the market conditions are, then you might choose to be able to have it so that it's not as transparent. But I think a global identification number in the transportation industry would be an unlocking of technological capabilities because of what it would facilitate between partners that don't currently have the ability to make easy interfaces.
Who would that benefit the most? The shippers, the freight carriers? You know, lay that out for us.
Well, it sprinkles in every bucket.
Yeah, that's right. I would agree.
It literally covers the consumer who's getting the cost of the transportation baked into each bottle of Tide that they get,
right?
Down to the driver who is stuck in a location that he doesn't know what the current rate is leaving from there, and he gets hit with a really low rate to be able to take a load because he's not aware of what the market conditions are. And, you know, the fuel surcharges and the variability of where he's going to end up after each of those loads as well, it becomes not a fluid model, but a disjointed, fragmented movement. But each one of these trucking companies that have their own authority and have their own drivers, they each have their own driver's license, and each truck that has its own truck number, those things aren't made available for the identification across the ecosystem, but they could be. And if they were, and done so in a way that didn't disclose, I wonder where all of this carrier's trucks are right now, but anonymize that information from the get-go, from the origination of where it's created from, we would be able to have a marketplace that was much more efficient than exists today.
Yeah, and just real quick to add on, Mark, then I'll let you talk, right? But literally right now, Andy, one of the biggest questions that brokers and shippers ask every day is, how much do I price that load for? They don't have a clue, right? The tools on the market, there's a bunch of them out there. They have so much variability in them. I've had calls from brokers going, hey, there's a $600 gap in this pricing. And I'm like, I pick one. So anyway, Mark, go ahead.
Well, I kind of think that the pricing thing has been solved more or less, but that's my own bias. As far as the efficiency, I wanted to mention that 12 to 15% of truck miles are empty miles, and that can certainly be improved upon. So if that's improved upon, trucking operations become more efficient, which is to the trucker's advantage, but it's also to the shipper's advantage because it creates more capacity. And if you look at the freight markets today, there's a real shortage, a real gap between capacity and what's needed. Truckers are in the driver's seat as far as pricing right now. I think the part of the pricing issue will always be with us on the spot marketplace, but a large part of it is lack of knowledge. You have some truckers that seriously underprice their assets. Others are always going for top dollar and seem to leverage their way into it. So I think there'll always be a pricing gap, but certainly if you've got robust data, you should be able to approximate what the current market price is.
Okay. I think price discovery is an interesting element. You know, when you have a broader section of the data to be able to work with, the timeliness of the delay to actual adjustment of the market can be modified, right? So if you're getting end of day reports from your locations, you might be able to summarize what the result was from end of day, but you don't know where it was at 8 o'clock in the morning compared to where it was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And these markets are very volatile, especially when you look at a market, you know, where a producer might have a hurricane coming to town and need to be able to get 50 truckloads of water, which is 40 truckloads above what it normally is. So they don't go to just their core carriers with it, but they extend their reach and they take those 50 loads and post it on 6 different markets. Well, now it looks like 300 loads, and 300 loads leaving from one origin looks like a spike in demand. And the carriers that are seeing those 300 loads are like, I don't need to take the one that I booked at the low price 2 hours ago. I can bail on that one and go rebook it and get it at $600 more for the same load I was just about to take. And these games between shippers putting their loads in as false information or brokers putting in information that's not necessarily representative of the complete picture is it's been around for a long time. And it is, as long as the markets sit with the gap for the games to take place, it will continue. But the opportunity for an industry to align when it's going through a technology transformation and agree to a set of standards and understand the rules for how they want to do business with each other, not just in a one-off relationship or in a 1 to 10 relationship, but literally in a marketplace relationship where trust and assuredness of transactional information integrity is guaranteed because it literally doesn't ever contain the real information. It's just moving anonymized elements of it.
Okay, we're getting down to the bottom of our time slot, so I'd like to ask a couple of what I'll call lightning round questions, if I could. Is there a possibility that if what was the number, Mark? 12% of all loads were operating empty?
12 to 15.
12 to 15%. I would imagine that adds to the carbon footprint of the country, which is not something we necessarily want to do. Is there a possibility that the government could get involved in terms of standards and forcing this cooperation?
There are some standards. I was just researching ARC IT 9.0, which is some IT standards on asset tracking, and you know, that could very much lead to unique identifiers.
Yeah, and there's other organizations like BETA that's done work related to the standards community and related to the transportation and supply chain industry. There's clearly been a lot of industry leaders that have identified the need for this utopian clearinghouse, this desire for connecting the parties, but the fear is any one party getting all of the information and them having their own shareholders to be able to answer to. And any one of the participants getting everything from everybody else makes it so that the market is not trustworthy. And a neutral share-owned utility is really where the opportunity for something like a pipeline where the the oil companies all share the ownership of it so that they can move their oil through the pipelines. They don't each need to have their own. And there's an opportunity here to be able to do the same sort of utility that's got an unbiased job to move anonymized data from point A to point A, B, C, D, E, F, G, every one of the other ones that are in the marketplace, and do so with regiment and security.
What I'd like to end up with is there are a lot of industries that have come together for what we'll call co-opetition, sharing data. Wall Street notably has exchanges. There's price discovery, and it's accurate. The airline industry, flights on multiple airlines and fly all over the place, and with a click of a button. So there's a need for it. And I just want to thank the panelists today, Neil, Mark, Michael, for your input.